Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about one of the all-time great metal bands, but one who sadly gets overlooked sometimes in the pantheon of, who are the true metal gods and not. I'm talking, of course, about Germany's Accept. Now, Accept, to some people, it's an institution. It seems like a household name. It seems like the kind of band I usually don't talk about on this channel, since I tend to focus on, the smaller bands who don't get a lot of attention. I try to give them their 15 minutes. So some people right now are thinking, well, why do we need you to tell us about Accept? Well, the reason is that for a lot of people, Accept is one of those kind of old fart bands that they never bothered checking out because they figured, that's grandpa's metal and it wasn't very good back then. So, yeah, Accept is a band that gets passed over by some folks. And when you look at, the timing, what happened with their discography, I think it's kind of clear why. Before I go through some of the albums here, and we're going to focus on kind of the classic early run of albums through the 1980s, I do want to point out this issue with the timeline. Accept got a very kind of quick jumpstart on the heavy metal explosion of the 1980s. They were there right at the beginning. Where were you in 1979? Accept was putting out their first album in 1979, while most bands, hadn't even been dreamed up yet. And they had a lot of success, of course, in the early 80s. By the time you got to the mid 80s, though, Accept, was already on like albums, 5, 6, 7, and we're kind of running out of steam. They, of course, had, their charismatic frontman Udo, left at one point, and it created a 3-year gap before they had another album come out that was not as well received. And it happened right in that time when metal was transitioning away from the traditional metal sounds of Priest and Maiden and Accept, and people were getting more focused on the more extreme side of things with thrash, death metal starting to rear its head. And of course, you had, the other end of the spectrum where a lot of people were hopping onto the hair metal and glam metal kind of bandwagon and going with something, much more, commercially friendly and digestible. And it kind of is like, one of the big champions for traditional straight up heavy metal kind of disappeared at that point. And by the time they came back, well, that ship had kind of sailed. And again, I'm speaking, not just in hyperbole or hindsight, but this was very much the case because I'm of that age. Me and my friends, we were getting into heavy metal there in the later half of the 80s, not the first half of the 80s. We first became aware of a couple of things like around the time Guns N' Roses and Def Leppard's Hysteria were coming out. We were the Hysteria kids. We weren't the Pyromania kids. We had to work backwards to hear that one. So for us, Accept wasn't really on the map. You'd hear Balls to the Wall, of course. That was about the only thing you knew about the band. It's like, yeah, okay, I don't know, were they a novelty act or something? Guess they were just one of those old bands, when you're 15 in the late 80s. Everything from 1980, to 1983 seemed ancient to you. And so that generation of kids, we didn't pay much attention to Accept. We didn't go back and check out their albums very quickly. It wasn't until a bit later that I had latched onto them and have been picking up their albums and paying attention ever since. So that's, the context here. There were a lot of fans, even in the late 80s, who just never checked out this band very carefully. They were thought of a little bit as a caricature band for this one goofy song, Balls to the Wall, that just gets chanted over and over and over in the chorus. With that, let's now start working through some of those early albums so you can see what's in the catalog. Not going to play any clips of this stuff. It's easy to track down. You hear it everywhere. But at least give you my 2 cents about all the early classic albums. So as I mentioned, Accept released their debut in 1979. It's this one. It's the only one I don't have a physical copy of, so we'll just go with the screenshot here. And yeah, Accept doesn't have a lot of classic album covers, but this one's, at least got a very memorable image, with them holding the giant chainsaw sword thing there. And, as you might expect for a debut from 1979, no, it's not the heaviest thing on earth. And this album does kind of get bypassed by a lot of people even today, I think. That said, however, it's actually a pretty good debut. And frankly, I think it's a lot more metallic than some of the other things that came out in 79. Point of comparison would be like the first Saxon album. That's released in the UK in 1979, and that has some good metal songs on it. But that album has a lot of different styles going on. Saxon, had some blues stuff and some boogie stuff, and they have this big 70s, the Rainbow, was it Rainbow Bridge, Rainbow Warrior, something about a rainbow, and it's more of like this kind of 70s, just rock epic. The Accept album is a lot more streamlined than that already, and it's feeling a little more metallic, even if it is only by 1979 standards. The album starts off with a decent pair of tracks. You've got Lady Lou and Tired of Me. Neither are classics in the overall Accept catalog, but they're decent, energetic tracks to get the album going. Then for track 3, you have Sea Winds. This is the one track most people will know from this album if they've paid attention to Accept. It's a really cool, epic ballad, so it's already showing a little versatility and range. Good track there. And, side A closes out with a couple of more tracks. Again, they're not killers, but it's pretty solid. Now, the album does run out of steam a little bit when you get towards the end of side B, in my opinion, at least. That's Rock and Roll and Street Fighter both feel very rough around the edges. That's not unusual for a debut album, but both of these songs are feeling like, yeah, this would probably have gotten left on the cutting room floor if you had anything a little bit stronger to put on the album. But hey, in between those, you do have, Hell Driver, which is pretty cool. Both Hell Driver and Sounds of War, which closed out side A, have some very cool screeching guitar work. For a 1979 album, this is pretty heavy and it's very much up in your face. Is it, hell-bent for leather or bomber or overkill heavy? No, it's not quite at that level. But again, it's leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of the stuff coming out in that year. So certainly not a terrible album. I'd say it's still a bit above average, even if, it's pretty simple and basic compared to what Accept was going to be doing pretty soon after that. So yeah, you don't have to completely bypass this debut album. Some folks, again, almost hold it at arm's length, but it's a solid enough record. Personally, I give it a thumbs up. Not a really strong, enthusiastic, shake my fist in the air kind of thumbs up, but it's like, yeah, okay, I can dig it. All right, well, the band wasted no time getting their second album out. Again, this was in the day and age still where bands would crank the albums out much faster. And for the second album, we get I'm a Rebel with the kind of, sword hilt artwork. Again, cover art not doing a lot. Some of these may also have had different covers in different territories. I've got one example of that I'll show a little bit later. But this is the cover I'm always used to for the Accept second album. And this was my first Accept album. Now, I did not get it in 1980. 1980, I was still probably learning not to eat the paste in kindergarten or something. But yeah, this was the first full-length Accept album I got. I found it just really cheap at a library record sale, of all things. And so, yeah, picked it up. This one, it's a step forward from the debut for sure. Starting to sound a little tighter, a little more confident on things. They are still, however, developing their sound. So this album, still has, a relatively simple structure. And I think this is where some of the like AC/DC comparisons come with the very early Accept catalog, is that, yeah, they're not doing anything, too flashy or complicated at this point. It's still pretty simple, straightforward, metal rock music. That said, this is a fun album to listen to. It's got several songs that are pretty catchy, stand out a bit, and will stick in your mind. Again, as I said, this was my first Accept album. I, listened to it a good amount when I got it. And then it did collect dust on the shelf for a long time after that. However, even during those years when I never played it, I could glance at the track list and still instantly hear some of these tracks in my mind. So it's kind of always a good sign of a well-written song when you can remember it, even if you haven't heard it for ages. It starts off, right away with, the very fun, bouncy, I'm a Rebel, which is listed as the AC/DC cover, of course. And yeah, there's kind of a weird history with that song in AC/DC, but it works very well for Accept. It's simple, catchy, bouncy, high energy, kicks the album off right. Save Us is a little different, but it's got a very cool chorus to it that I dig. You've got, No Time to Lose and Thunder and Lightning are okay, wrapping out side A. Not my two favorite tracks on the album. Side B starts with China Lady, which rocks out really, really well. Uh, you've got I Want to Be No Heroes, and kind of again average. The King is a really good track on here that doesn't always get its due. This one's again a little bit more of that kind of epic sweep to it, kind of a sad connotation to the lyrics and the atmosphere, and very very memorable. Sticks with you quite well. And then the closer is Do It, which again pretty simple, straightforward stuff, but it works in the context of this album. It's absolutely fine. So again, with the second Accept album, we're still doing good here. It's not anything fancy, and I get why some people would bypass it. These first two albums very much kind of fit together as the early phase. Yeah, the band is finding their footing, getting used to what they want to do. But personally, I like this album, and yeah, I will still take it out and play it from time to time. There's enough good tracks on it to make it worth giving it a spin from every now and then. All right, 1981, the band plows forward with album number 3, which this is where there's a big step up in the heaviness. And this, of course, is Breaker. If you're wondering why there's a UPC symbol in the middle of the cover, this is one of those 2-on CD sets, but it's a relatively cheaply done one. But yeah, Breaker, kind of the classic image, close up, of the, not sure, she's scared, excited, surprised. Go several ways there, I guess. But for a lot of people, this is their favorite Accept album. Or if it's not, it ranks very high when people do a lot of their Accept album rankings. And yeah, this is where you start to really feel more of that kind of, muscular, grindy power that Accept is best known for. You start with, Starlight's a very good track, but it's really just setting the stage for the track Breaker, which is one of the real icons of early 80s heavy metal. After Breaker, you've got, Run If You Can, Can't Stand the Night's also pretty good. And side A closes with Son of a Bitch, which is the potty mouth track, which has the hilarious kind of, grunt where you can almost just imagine Udo was like, I'm just going to try to sound as angry as I can. It's just this. He's trying to make it sound like tough and angry. To me, it always sounds like he's horribly constipated and trying to push half a pound cake out of his butt or something. Yes, the sound of a constipated grunt, recorded already 1981. But it's a fun song for this, that, kind of, foul-mouthed teenage, anthem. Side 2 kicks off with Burning, which is one of their sort of underappreciated or overlooked faster songs. Accept's got some burners in their catalog, and Burning is a really good one that way. What else have we got on this one? Feelings is one that doesn't stick with me as much. It's all right. Midnight Highway is where they really kind of channel their inner Judas Priest. It's got that, heading out to the highway kind of vibe about it. But this one, it still works. It's definitely meant to be more commercial friendly, but it's also heavy enough and well enough executed that you can enjoy the track. You're not feeling like, this is some throwaway radio single, because it's not. Breaking Up Again is, the kind of, quieter ballady track, which, again, there's usually one track on each of these early albums where Udo's, not doing the vocals, and it's not handling on this one. And the album closes with Down and Out, which, pretty solid track there too. So yeah, Breaker sees Accept, really coming to their own as, a full-fledged heavy metal band. The first two albums are metal, but like I said, maybe leaning a little bit more in that, stripped down direction. Now you're really adding, all that testosterone fuel that you expect with this kind of band. And again, this is still 1981. They're already getting heavier than a lot of their contemporaries. Were there heavier bands on the planet? Sure, Venom's up and running by this time, and bands like that. but you don't have a whole lot of competition. And again, Accept is doing this on mainland Europe as well. Some of the bands, of course, that were getting extremely big by this time, with Priest, Maiden getting a lot of attention, Motorhead, that's all in the UK. In the US, you had some bands starting to, work on some heavy stuff by this point. But having Accept do it in Germany for continental Europe, kind of, following up on the work the Scorpions had done throughout the 70s and we're still doing in the 80s, they're really establishing, Europe, as a, ground zero for some of the, really tough sounding classic heavy metal songs. But the band, of course, is far from done. 1982, you get their fourth album. This one, of course, is Restless and Wild. And this is my favorite album from the band. We'll just get that out of the way right away. Comes on a couple of different versions. Original cover with the, burning guitars. I always thought that one was kind of cool looking. The cover most folks, though, are familiar with is this one, with the live shot of the band on the cover. There's a lot of pressings, of course. This particular one is a red vinyl pressing that I picked up for just a couple of bucks years ago. Was happy to find it. There's also a clear vinyl version, which I don't have to show yet. Someday, this sick little colored vinyl monkey will find that, and then we'll have 3 copies to show. 4 if you include the CD. I'm a sick little monkey. But I like the album enough that it's one I will pick up multiple copies of. And once again, you've got, this is that kind of classic era of Accept now. We're running at, all cylinders burning. Everything's full speed ahead. The album starts, of course, with that goofy kind of little folksy accordion yodely thing, where they, then mess, with the vinyl scratching sound and go into the big scream and launch Fast as a Shark. It's kind of a goofy way to start the album. It shows a little bit of a sense of humor, and lots of other bands, have done that kind of thing around that time and since. You have the debut Tokyo Blade album has that, weird Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia thing. And they did it differently on 2 different pressings of that album, because they needed to do it twice. One, I think, is just the tape sped up compared to the other, but still, it's weird. And other bands have done the same kind of thing. You quickly forget about it, though, because Fast as a Shark is, often cited as, the prototype, one of the first speed metal anthems from the early 1980s. Bands had played faster songs than this for 10 years. You can go all the way back, to the early 70s and some of Deep Purple's catalog and similar tracks. I should do a 70s speed metal episode sometime. That would be fun to put together. Have to do a little digging for that one. But yeah, Fast as a Shark is the song that really just grabbed a lot of young metal fans by the throat and blew their socks off. You read so many interviews with people, who are coming up on metal at that time, who always quote that song as just being like, oh, we couldn't believe how fast it was. Sure, by today's standards, we're like, yeah, sure, that's cute. Here, can you keep up with Cattle Decapitation or something? Of course not. But this is 1982. Metallica's a full year away from getting anything, recorded and out to the masses. There is no thrash metal. There's no speed metal per se at this point. And Accept is, absolutely killing it and doing so at high velocity. So it works incredibly well. The album runs right into Restless and Wild, which slows things down, but still has a very driving intensity to it. It's a very tough song, very memorable, good kind of, chant-along chorus, but in a tough, grindy way, not in the let's hold up our cigarette lighters until somebody plays Freebird way. Restless and Wild, the title track, is amazing. Top stuff. Ahead of the Pack kind of keeps that forceful energy going, picks it up just a little bit, but it's still a very intense, fierce track. You've got Shake Your Heads. Yeah, this is now one where, yes, you're supposed to slow down and kind of bang together in unison. But again, it doesn't feel like a overly commercial friendly song either. This is a metal anthem, not a let's get on MTV and, get a bunch of, 15-year-old boys and girls to do this with us kind of song. Side A closes out with Neon Nights, which is a very cool song. It has a little quieter, slower vibe at first, but it's got a good tension in the song, and it kind of slowly builds and slowly builds. And I like the way that they kind of open it up for like the last minute or so of the song, where it picks up the pace all of a sudden. It's just, again, a really well crafted song. You know, everyone by this point, it's only been a couple of years since I'm a Rebel came out, but everybody has, made leaps and bounds in terms of, how they're performing, what they're able to do. The guitars are so much fuller, the production's better. The band's come a long way. All right, you get to side two. Get ready. This one is a little more sing-along-y than some of the other stuff. Demon's Night is a cool, kind of heavy vibe to it. The song never sticks with me as well as most of the others on this album, but it is still a cool, heavy tune. You've got Flash Rocking Man and Don't Go Stealing My Soul Away. A little wordy on the title for that one. But these are both, again, relatively up-tempo songs. They keep the energy flowing here. And the album closes out with Princess of the Dawn, which is different, but very cool. It's got, this, funny little, do, 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 do kind of picking thing over the top of it, and almost kind of a whispered chorus, with Princess of the Dawn. It's a kind of a slightly odd way to close the album, since so much of it's, been a little bit more, high octane, very powered out stuff. But it's a fantastic song nonetheless. And so, yeah, there's almost no weak stuff here. There's a couple of songs that don't stick with me as well as the rest, but it's a fantastic album, start to finish. And yeah, there's a good reason many people cite it as the band's highlight. But there are a lot of people who really only know one Accept album. And if they do, it's not Restless and Wild. It's the album that came out in the following year. So we're up to 1983. And notice we're already on album number 5. Put that in terms. 1983, Iron Maiden's done what? 3 albums? Getting ready to release the 4th. Metallica is getting ready to do the first album at the end of the year. Same with Slayer. Yeah, Accept was out of the gate before a lot of these other huge bands. They just were. And in 1983, they released Balls to the Wall, the Accept album that your more casual folks are going to know and love. I'm kind of mixed on this album at times. It's got the iconic cover image, which I've never thought was that great for a cover. Again, I don't know if I can say any Accept album has a fantastic cover. This one I was always kind of like, doesn't do a lot for me. But there's no denying it's a great sounding album. Production is really strong on it. Compared to Restless and Wild, this album feels much tighter and more focused. The speedy tracks are not, as over the top speedy, and the maybe slower or tracks. There's nothing like a Princess of the Dawn on here necessarily. Everything feels like it's much more zeroed in on doing one thing, which is going to be this kind of mid-paced, maybe a slow gallop, and really get the fists pumping and the testosterone flowing and getting everybody singing along. And of course, it was wildly successful at that. Let's take a quick look at the track list for Balls to the Wall. You start off with the title track. That's the big hit. That's the song that drives, the entire world crazy. It's a fine enough song. It's one of those I just, personally, I've heard it enough. And it's a little bit on the repetitive side. They go back to that chorus, maybe just a little bit much. Again, don't dislike the song or anything. It's just one I've heard so much that it doesn't have a huge impact on me anymore. It follows up with London Leather Boys, which is a good kind of grinding track. Has a little hook to it in the chorus, though. It's a solid track. It's very similar in some ways to the second track on Restless and Wild, the title track. Again, it's not going at full speed or anything, but it definitely keeps the energy up and keeps you hooked in. You're paying attention. With Fight It Back, Head Over Heels, Losing More Than You've Ever Had, Again, there's some good tracks in here. Fight It Back is one of the overlooked tracks on the album, I think. It's got, big scream in it. Very forceful song. Like that one quite a bit. So yeah, overall, side A is pretty solid. On side B, you've got tracks like, Love Child, Turn Me On. These are okay. Losers and Winners is one where they pick up the pace a bit. It's going a little faster. Again, there's not as much variation in speed across this album as there was on Breaker or Restless and Wild. They're really staying in that pocket, but doing absolutely fine there. You've got Guardian of the Night and Winter Dreams. I don't think the album closes on the strongest material with these two songs. So again, overall, it's a pretty solid set of songs. It works well as an album. It's got a very good focus to it. For me personally, I just prefer the little bit more over the top, out of control feel of Restless and Wild and Breaker. But hey, millions of record sales around the world can't be completely wrong, and so the album takes off. It makes the band go from being a big name in the metal community to international superstars. And the album comes out at a good time too. 1983 is really when heavy metal's becoming that, international pop culture phenomenon with things like Pyromania, Iron Maiden getting bigger. Judas Priest is kind of, basically at the height of their popularity after Screaming for Vengeance and stuff. These are when huge tours going on worldwide, tons of fans flocking. Ozzy's doing well on his solo stuff by this point. So yeah, Accept is definitely right place, right time, with the right album and the right song to capitalize on all of that. With all the popularity and touring associated with Balls to the Wall, 1984 would be the first year the band didn't have a new studio album come out. Folks would have to wait until 1985 to get to the next album. And this would be album number 6. So from 1979 to 1985, they've already put out 6 albums. Again, the workload here is a thing. And it's when they put out this album, 1986's Metal Heart, or sorry, 1985's Metal Heart. For a lot of folks, this is the point where they start kind of looking for the exits. It's like, I don't know about that one. It's the color scheme to the cover again is kind of weird. It's kind of a neat idea, a heart with all the engine parts in it. But yeah, the color scheme is a little strange, with the brighter blue and the red, almost getting into slight shades of pink on it. It's not that far off. So, and again, Metal Heart, that could be a real barn burner kind of connotation, or it could be something meant to be more pop friendly. Where does this album fall? Personally, I like the album. I do see why some folks are a little lukewarm on it, though. Let's work through the track list here. It starts out with Metal Heart, which is a good kind of pounding opening anthem. They're using kind of big background chorus of background vocals in the chorus. Gives the song a little bit of kind of a big epic full grand sound. I wonder if they were kind of trying to emulate what they had done with the chorus of Balls to the Wall a little bit. But yeah, good opening track, kind of a mid-paced, again, slow to mid-paced gallop, works well. Second track, Midnight Mover. For some folks, this might be where they start to raise an eyebrow a little bit, because it definitely does have kind of a slicker, little bit more commercial vibe to it. It's, sing-along catchy, but in the way that you could probably get away with, just like, for, typical high school kids, not for denim and leather clad underground masses. Now that said, I like the song. I think it's again really well structured, played and performed quite well. It gets stuck in your ear. It does what it's supposed to. It sticks with you. But it does feel like, it's getting a little more polished here. The band, you don't have the rougher, gruffer sound on this album. The production's still good, but it lacks that real kind of macho vibe that Balls to the Wall had, and the rougher qualities that you had on Breaker or Restless and Wild. Up to the limit. Here's another. This one's up tempo, kind of forceful. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. This would have fit on any of the previous albums just fine. Wrong is Right. Also, this one's, a faster paced number. So we're doing pretty good here through side A. Now, side A does close on a little bit of a groan fest with Screaming for a Love Bite, a song about getting a hickey. If you could somehow change out all the lyrics, you might be able to put together, musically, there's nothing wrong with the track. But yeah, this one was obviously kind of meant to be, the fun song that the kids, they'll love it. I don't know who came up with the idea of, the title. Maybe something got a little lost in translation here. Not sure. It's worth pointing out at this point, I haven't mentioned it, that, they did have, other folks help write songs for them, including, one of their famous, songwriters, was a female. So some of their songs are actually written like more from like, the female point of view when it came to like, wanting to party or, finding somebody, to hook up with. So yeah, they had, this kind of different take in the songwriting for sure. Okay, so side A, still quite good. Just, this one goofy song at the end. Side B, you've got, Too High to Get It Right. Has that kind of, again, repetitive chanty chorus with some background vocals. It feels a little bit like a, less impressive version of Balls to the Wall. Dogs on Leads, weird title, but this is probably the like toughest, most muscular sounding song. This is the track on here that most sounds like it could have been on the previous album. So doing pretty good there. Teach Us to Survive is a little strange. I'm not really sure quite what the band was going for there. It seems like maybe they were wanting to try to branch out a little bit with this number. Doesn't quite work for me. But hey, if you're just taking one song per album to try something a little different with, that's okay. I'll give you that one, even if I don't like it. You're trying something slightly different. Maybe it clicks, maybe it doesn't. It mixes things up a little bit. So even though it's a thumbs down for me on that song, I'm not going to give it, it's not going to ruin the album having this one kind of different song on here. Then it closes out, with, Living for Tonight and Bound to Fail. Bound to Fail has, this big monster, riff on it. It's got a really good galloping pace, really heavyweight vibe to it. So overall, I think it's actually a quite good album. It's just that, it's less focused and tight compared to Balls to the Wall. They're trying a few different things on here. Balls to the Wall is just, again, it's like a clenched fist. Everything is, in exactly one place. This album's more like, jazz fingers a little bit. It's trying a few different things here and there. We'll try this, we'll try that. But there's nothing embarrassing about it. Well, except for the title to Screaming for a Love Bite. That one maybe is a little embarrassing. But other than that, it's a pretty good set of tracks. And as such, I think it deserves a little better credit than it tends to get. So 1985, I think Accept was still doing okay, even if it is a little slicker sounding album, with a couple of tracks that maybe are leaning a little more friendly. All right. The band would power on into 1986. Sorry, I keep saying 86 for Metal Heart, but Metal Heart was 85, and 86 sees them release album number 7, which is Russian Roulette. This album. Now, this would be the last album before Udo would leave the band for a spell. So this is going to be the last one I touch on tonight. This album is often cited as Accept growing up. You read different reviews and commentaries on it. It's often like, oh, they're becoming more mature here. The lyrics are a little more thoughtful. There's more introspection. I guess there's some of that. But focusing on that, I think, draws attention away from the fact that this is still a very good, very heavy, solid Accept album. It's still bona fide heavy metal through and through. If anything, it's heavier than the previous album. It gets, back closer to the Balls to the Wall kind of territory. Before we go through the track list, just want to point out, this is the one Accept album cover from these early ones that I really do like. You've got, band members there, kind of doing this a little, scene of, Russian roulette, with Udo being presented, with the pistol there. Uh, a lot of folks would look at this and say, oh, that's really corny and cheesy. I don't know. I think it's kind of brilliant. They actually took the time and bothered to kind of, set, the background a bit. Everyone's got, the costume and stuff. What I really like here too is, all three guys there in the middle, their attention is drawn to different parts of the scene that's playing out. One of them is looking at Udo to see what he's going to do. The other one is looking at, the other duelist. And the third one has his attention focused on the gun itself. So, even though they're wearing, the goofy, hats and everything about this fits. It's telling the snapshot of a story. Nobody knows how this story is going to play out. Neither of the, duelists in the game of Russian roulette know what's going to happen. And none of the three who are there bearing witness to it, none of them know what's about to happen either. I think it's a very cool image. I love the way they put that together. With that said, though, how's the music? As I mentioned, I think this one, is definitely back to a heavier caliber of stuff overall compared to Metal Heart. And it's not like Metal Heart had really slipped that much anyway. But let's see what we've got on Russian Roulette. Starts out with TV War. Good song, pretty forceful driving number, kicking things off here. Again, yes, the lyrics, they're paying a little more attention to some social commentary and things like that. They're not just going to chant balls to the wall 100 times. But it's not like you're listening to a Pearl Jam album either that's just going to bring you down while Eddie Vedder, complains about pollution and Ticketmaster for 50 minutes. After TV War, you've got Monster Man. This is playing out again, kind of like the first couple of tracks on Restless and Wild. Start with the faster track, then followed up, with one that slows it down a little bit, but really kind of, keeps the blood pumping at the same time. It's got a good chorus to it. It sticks with you right away. Solid tune. The third track is Russian Roulette. Now, if you listen to the song, I don't think they ever say the words Russian Roulette in the song. It's a little funny because when they get to the chorus, what you hear chanted over and over is war games, war games. And so it's kind of like, Russian roulette's not really a war game. You didn't have NATO guys, getting around, a table like this and simulating what happens if, Iron Curtain countries and, NATO countries pass a revolver back and forth around. That's not a war game. So it's always left me a little bit scratching my head. What's up with the chorus in this song? Well, what had happened, the album was originally slated to be called War Games, and this was going to be the title track on the album War Games. This album came out in, I believe it's April 1986. But in the lead up to the album, they ran into a little problem. The German band Gravedigger released their third full-length album in February of 86, and it was entitled, you guessed it, War Games. So to their credit, band management, label, somebody, kind of did recognize the fact that, okay, they've kind of beat us to the punch on that one, and it's going to look a little weird to have two traditional German metal bands release albums with the exact same title within 90 days of one another. So except revamped things. The song became Russian Roulette, as did the album. I think it worked out for the best. Like I said, I think the cover concept is great, and Russian Roulette's a little more unique as a title than War Games. So, hey, having Gravedigger beat you to the punch actually, I think, worked out in your favor. So yeah, Russian Roulette, aka War Games, it's fine as a song. It's a good chant, sing-along kind of number. Except it's got a lot of these, they did them quite well. It's Hard to Find a Way is next. Not my favorite song. This is probably the one I glance over the most on side A. And then you've got Aiming High wraps out side A. This one again, faster pace. You're getting that pulse quickened with this kind of track. It works quite well. So side A of this is actually pretty strong. Then let's see, side B, you starts with Heaven is Hill and Another Second to Be. Okay tracks, maybe a little average. Walking in the Shadows has kind of a cool vibe to it. Man Enough to Cry. Here's another one where, it's kind of an odd title, and lyrically it seems a little, oh, excuse me. It's a little bit of a weird lyrical concept for a song, but it does highlight that some of these Accept songs, sometimes maybe stuff was lost in translation, but other times it was being intentionally written from these other points of view. Like, hey, women want sex too. And hey, not everything has to be, completely, I'm too tough, I would never cry. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that there's a little bit to dig in there with the lyrics. It's not all just chant balls to the wall all the time. And the album closes with Stand Tight, which is another, very solid track. So side B may not have anything, that's, a super strong standout track, but it holds its own just fine. Front to back, this album works very well. It's still a solid heavy metal album. It's another one that, again, by this point, a lot of people don't seem to pay attention to, except I had avoided this album for a long time because it just seemed like, I guess that's one of the later ones where they had started to suck. No, not really. I picked it up because I stumbled into it for $5. I'm like, I will give $5. It still has Udo on it. Let's finish out that, listening session of the Udo era, 80s Accept. And it's just like, wow, this is absolutely fine. If you like the other Accept albums, I can't really see why somebody would complain about this one a whole lot. But yeah, this would be, the end of the line for Udo in Accept for a while. At this point, he splits, and it's going to be a while before the next album. As I mentioned at the start of the video, we've got this one, Russian Roulette, came out in 86. 1989 is when Eat the Heat would come out. And those 3 years are kind of a big deal in the heavy metal universe. That's very much where you go from 86 traditional metal's always already feeling a little bit long in the tooth. Some of the other champions of this style are moving on to other things around 86. Iron Maiden's all of a sudden using a whole lot of synthesizers. Whereas in 1983, their album proudly proclaimed on Peace of Mind, no synthesizers used in the making of this album. And now it's 1986 and Somewhere in Time comes out. Same with kind of Judas Priest. You go from, Breaking the Law and, The Hellion and Electric Eye and all that stuff in the early 80s. By 86, they're your turbo lover. How many guitar synths can we play with? And then you get, what's really happening in 86 is stuff like Master of Puppets and, Slayer, and 87, Death. This is the stuff that's, really becoming, the face of heavy metal moving forward. That traditional metal stuff is taking more and more of a back seat. So yeah, by the time 89 came around, and again, 88, 89, those are the years me and my friends are getting into metal. There's no new Accept record. And when one does come out, nobody paid any attention to it. They felt like a dinosaur band to kids by the time you got to 1989. Of course, now Accept would still go on. Udo would return. They would do a lot more albums. He would keep, his, UDO project going as well, too. And they're still around and kicking to this day. I am not at all familiar with the later part of Accept's catalog, so this is a great place for me to stop, and let's talk metal in the comments down below instead. What are your favorites among these early Accept albums? Have you heard all of them, or have you skipped some of them for a reason? I would definitely encourage you to go back and fill in the gaps. You don't have to buy them if you don't want to, of course. They're all over YouTube, Spotify, etc. But check them out. Give them a fair chance. There's a lot of good material there. And for those of you who are familiar with the later parts of Accept's catalog, which ones are essential? Which ones really can be bypassed because maybe they had a few duds along the way that you could give people the wrong impression of later Accept? I don't know which ones those are. Please tell me. Tell everybody else who's reading the comments too. I see later used Accept albums in used bins from time to time, but sometimes it's a little bit, gun shy there. Yeah, get it? Gun shy? You get it. It's like, hey, do you want to pay $10 for that used CD? I don't know what era that's from. I don't know if that's when they were still sounding great or if they hit a lull. So any information folks can leave in the comments down below would be quite appreciated. All right, time to sign off. Until next time, everybody, take care. And as always, bang your head, shake your fist.